My buddy Mark and I had been planning the World Cup trip for months. We weren't exactly die-hard soccer fans, but any excuse to get out of town and sit in a packed stadium felt like reason enough to book the tickets. We got there early, found our seats, and settled in. The energy was insane. Tens of thousands of people were crammed into one space, all buzzing off the same thing. By kickoff, I was already on my third beer and feeling pretty great about the whole decision, when my eyes fell on this guy sitting about 6 rows ahead of us and a few seats to the left. I noticed him only because he was the only person in that entire section not watching the game. While everyone else was angled toward the pitch and reacting to the ball, he was turned completely around in his seat, facing back into the crowd and eyeing me up. At first, I brushed it off, figuring he might be looking for somebody, but he didn't look like he was scanning around. He was still as a statue, staring directly at me without any of the restless shifting a person does when they're searching for a friend. I looked away and told myself I was imagining it. A few minutes passed. When I looked back, he was still staring. We locked eyes and he grinned at me, sticking his tongue out. It was enough to make my skin crawl. Giggling at my scrunched up nose, he opened his mouth even wider, and I felt my stomach drop. The guy didn't have a single tooth. His gums were bare and smooth, like he'd never had any teeth to begin with. His lips were stretched into this massive, creepy grin that looked completely wrong, and his tongue was crazy long, hanging way past his chin and brushing against his jawline. He locked eyes with me again, gave a little head tilt, and started moving that insane tongue, doing this weird panting thing like a dog in the summer heat. I grabbed Mark's arm and pointed. "Dude, look, there's this weirdo guy 6 rows down." Mark took a quick peek, maybe 3 seconds, and shrugged. "Nah, I don't see anything strange." He turned back to the game. I told him to look again, specifically at the guy who wasn't watching the match and was turned around in his seat. Mark looked again, shrugged, and said there were like 40,000 people here and half of them probably weren't watching the game either. The stadium erupted as the team scored and the whole place went nuts. Banners went up, confetti flew, and everyone was screaming and cheering. I tried to find the weirdo through the mess of high fives and hugs, but couldn't see him. Eventually, I figured I was just psyching myself out and decided to enjoy the moment with everyone else. When the noise settled and everyone sat back down, the man was closer. He jumped 4 rows and was sitting in a spot he definitely had not been in before. My hand tightened on my cup. As time progressed, it kept happening. Every goal scare, every eruption where the crowd pulled my attention to the pitch for 3 seconds, he moved. By halftime, he was close enough that I could see him clearly. The tongue was still out and moving. His eyes hadn't blinked once in the entire time I'd been watching him. He was surrounded by normal people eating nachos and checking their phones, and not a single one of them reacted to him. I leaned over and asked the guy sitting next to him if he knew him. He looked at me, glanced at the seat beside him, and asked if I was high or something. I was losing my mind. When the second half started, he was 3 seats over, right in my row. My heart started hammering, and I was barely breathing. I could actually hear his soft, steady panting, like someone breathing heavily in a closet. I practically clawed at Mark's arm and kept saying his name until he finally turned. "What the fuck, dude? There's this really weird guy 3 seats over." "The seats are empty. There's no one there, Jason." But he was. The man leaned forward and shot that tongue out, making it even longer than I'd seen yet. He let out this little awful giggle at me freaking out and whistled. He then proceeded to swing his tongue around like a snake. It curled up slowly, wrapping around his cheek, sliding right up towards his eye, then pulling back and doing the whole gross thing over and over. I was horrified. Suddenly, both ends of his tongue shot out at the same time and started coiling up over his face. It looked like it was tightening, and he was choking. I closed my eyes and started screaming my head off. I only knew I was doing it because Mark was suddenly shaking me by the shoulders, and the whole section went dead quiet. Someone nearby even shouted to ask if I was having a seizure. "Jason, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Mark was shaking me. I opened my eyes and pointed at the seat, but it was empty. My mouth dried up. We sat there for the rest of the second half, and I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in the match. I was watching that seat. The people around it went back to the game like nothing had happened, like they'd been doing the entire time. Mark didn't say much on the way back to the hotel. I could tell he didn't know whether to be worried or chalk it up to too much beer. Later, I checked the seating chart for that section. The seat he ended up in showed up as unsold in the game records. Seriously, no one was supposed to be sitting there. I've told this story a bunch since then. I can always see the moment on people's faces when they decide I must have imagined the whole thing. Maybe I did, but I honestly don't know what's scarier. A guy with no teeth and that crazy tongue showing up in a packed stadium where only I could see him? Or the thought that whatever that thing was, it was sitting 3 seats away, and I was the only one it was focused on. It's just been Noah and me since his dad passed in a car accident when Noah was 3. I really tried to be both mom and dad, but between working 3 jobs just to get by in LA and keeping up with his school, I barely had any time to spend with him. So, when the Soccer World Cup semifinal came to town, I jumped on those tickets. It was the week of Noah's 8th birthday, so I figured this would be the ultimate surprise for him as well. My kid's been obsessed with soccer since he was 4, ever since his uncle put a game on and Noah sat there 6 inches from the screen for the full 90 minutes, without even blinking. The morning we left for SoFi, he was up before 6. He had his jersey on and even made me take a bunch of photos of him in front of the car before we even left the driveway. Our seats weren't exactly front row, but we didn't care. Noah spent pretty much the whole first half standing on his chair so we could see better. Honestly, watching him was way more entertaining than the actual game. He was totally locked in, grabbing my arm every time someone almost scored, calling out every player by name and rambling on about their plays like a mini-coach. By the time halftime rolled around, we were both starving. The line at the nearest concession stand was already snaking back into the aisle. I told him I was going to quickly run and grab something, but he needed to stay in his seat.
Do not move an inch. I'll be quick and keep an eye on you, okay?
I made him look at me when I said it. "Okay, Mom." He nodded and went back to watching the replay screen. The concession area was way worse than I thought. It was a total traffic jam at the entrance. People were shoving each other, and the line was barely moving. I kept trying to look back towards our seats, but about 10 minutes in, I couldn't see our row from where I was anymore. I kept reassuring myself that Noah was fine. There were people around him, and he was old enough to take care of himself. But I still felt uneasy. It took me 15 minutes to fight my way back with the popcorn and drinks. When I finally got there, my seat was empty. My palms immediately started sweating as I looked around at the rows, the aisle, and the concourse behind me. I shouted his name. The woman right next to our seats looked up.
Have you seen my son? He's this tall and he's in the red jersey. Oh, the kid? He went towards the exit tunnel with his dad. Your man said he'd get him some ice cream.
My eyes widened and my blood went cold. I spotted them before she could even finish her sentence. Noah was heading straight for the tunnel, holding hands with some guy I didn't recognize. The man was wearing one of those dark blue stadium jackets you see at every merch booth. Instead of running or doing anything suspicious, he was walking like he really was Noah's father. My son was looking up at him, chatting away innocently. I lost it and screamed Noah's name at the top of my lungs. Noah whipped his head around, but the guy didn't even slow down. He gave one quick glance back before dragging Noah into the corridor and picking up the pace as they disappeared. I climbed over the seats in front of me to get there faster. I sprinted down the corridor, through the ramp, and into the dim half-light of the parking structure. My lungs were on fire, and my heart was pounding, but I didn't stop. My son needed me. The noise from the crowd inside the stadium became muffled. Everything got quieter and darker at the same time. They were about 30 feet ahead of me. I screamed Noah's name again, and this time he tried to stop and turn around, but the man yanked his arm and pulled him forward without breaking stride. I caught up to them in the parking garage and grabbed Noah's free arm. I yanked hard. My son started crying, completely freaked out and confused. The guy dug his fingers into Noah's arm, and my son let out a scream that made my skin crawl. I swung for the guy's gut, but he was too quick. He clocked me right in the jaw. I heard a crack, and everything went white for a second as pain exploded through my face. I barely had enough time to react before he landed another punch straight to my nose. I'd never been hit that hard. I slammed sideways into a car and immediately tasted blood. My vision flickered. Noah was screaming somewhere nearby. The guy had him again and was trying to drag him off, but I had my hand locked onto Noah's sleeve, and I wasn't letting go for anything. He turned back, ready to hit me again, when suddenly headlights flashed around the corner as a couple of cars pulled in. The guy glanced at the lights and let go of Noah's hand. He swore under his breath and disappeared between two cars. I heard his footsteps for a heartbeat before silence fell. I dropped to the ground and held Noah. My nose was bleeding all over his jersey, and he was shaking. I kept holding him until the people from those cars finally reached us. The man called the cops, while the woman helped me stop the bleeding. The police showed up and took our statements. They checked the parking garage footage and got a fuzzy picture of the guy's face, but nothing clear enough to identify him. It's been almost 2 years now, and as far as I know, they never found him. Noah still plays soccer. His love for the game won't let him stop. We haven't talked about that day in a long time, and I don't push it. But he hates crowds now and sticks close to me in public. Sometimes when I go to grab his hand, he grabs mine first. I know he's trying to get over it, but it's hard for a kid that young to process the darkness that filthy stranger showed him. I'm just grateful my son only got a glimpse of it and not the full picture. I had recently moved to Chicago for a promotion, and honestly, work had become pretty much my whole life. I barely knew anyone outside the office. Being 26 and 1,000 miles from home, the loneliness was seriously getting to me. I was desperate for anything familiar, so when they announced the World Cup semifinal, I booked a ticket within the hour. The day of the semifinal, I called out of work, hopped the train downtown solo, and sat there in my seat with a hamburger and a beer. The game was actually wild. Soldier Field was totally packed, and the energy in that place was exactly the kick I needed. I was so sucked into the match that I didn't realize I had knocked back 4 beers by halftime, twice my usual amount, until my bladder started bursting. I still waited until halftime before I left my seat. The lines in my section were a total nightmare. They were backed up past the concession stands and looked like at least a 10-minute wait. I figured I'd just start walking. I was sure that if I went far enough into the concourse, I'd eventually find a bathroom that wasn't totally slammed. Listening to some Coldplay through my earbuds, I ended up walking way farther than I planned. Stadium corridors are always a mess, twisting and turning in ways that make zero sense unless you already know the layout, which I didn't. I went down some ramp I hadn't seen before, and the crowd noise started dropping off. Suddenly, I was in a hallway that was dead quiet, with bare concrete walls and a buzzing fluorescent light. There were no food stands, signs, or anyone else around. I was about to turn around and head back when my eyes fell on a closed restroom door at the end of the hallway, where an older-looking security guard stood. Without thinking much of it, I walked right up and told him I really had to go, asking if there was a line. "Restroom's closed for maintenance. You'll need to head back up to the main concourse." The guard grumbled. "Man, I really can't wait that long. I've been walking for 10 minutes and I'm desperate. I'd be in and out in 30 seconds. "I'm sorry, I can't let anyone in." He stepped slightly to the left, centering himself directly in the doorway, and I noticed the inconsistencies I would have otherwise ignored. His uniform was 2 sizes too big. The shoulders were way too wide, and the sleeves practically swallowed his hands. He was also sweating buckets, which was bizarre because it was freezing down there. And he kept peeking at the door behind him, as if he were making sure whatever was inside stayed there. I made a joke about wetting myself because I didn't know what else to do with the weird energy coming off him. He laughed, but I could tell he was faking it. I held my hands up and told him I'd back off. He nodded and tilted his head just a tiny bit, but it was enough for me to catch a glimpse of what was behind him. The door wasn't locked shut. Through the crack, I saw some kind of red syrup smeared across the floor. I squinted and caught sight of a pair of bare legs, completely still. My brain took a full second to process it. My eyes widened and my heart started pounding. When I looked back up, he was already staring me down. His expression hadn't changed, but his eyes were narrowed, and I saw his knuckles go white around the grip of his security baton. I fumbled out something about finding another bathroom upstairs. I really tried to keep my voice level as I turned and started walking casually. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to keep reminding myself to walk normally.
"You saw the body, didn't you?"
he whispered. Without wasting a second, I took off running as fast as I could. My lungs were on fire, and my breath was coming out ragged. I was yelling for help, but there was nobody in the hall to hear me. I could hear him behind me. I risked a glance back and saw he was closing the gap, fast. He had a sick grin on his face while he chased me. Suddenly, he swung his baton and caught me across the shoulder blade. I yelped and stumbled. Pain shot through my left side. He was only a couple of feet away. I managed to catch my balance and hit the next corner as fast as I could. I sprinted straight into 3 officers standing by the concession stand at the end of the hall and slammed into the middle one so hard that we almost both wiped out on the floor. I desperately grabbed at his jacket and pointed back down the hallway while trying to explain that there was a body in the bathroom and the killer was right behind me. The 2 cops ran past me, but the guy didn't slow down or put his hands up. It took all 3 officers to finally wrestle him down and slap the cuffs on. He fought the whole time. Turns out the actual security guard was the one inside the bathroom. He'd been covering that specific hallway when the psycho jumped him. He'd planned to steal the uniform, rob as many people as he could, and flee. Investigators told me later that he'd spent weeks scoping out the stadium, figuring out the staff schedules and blind spots so he knew exactly where to operate unseen. I didn't go back in for the second half. I could hardly pay attention to anything when my mind was still stuck in that hallway and the nightmare I had just escaped. I couldn't sleep for a whole week. My manager was understanding after I told him what had happened and gave me 15 days off so I could visit my family and try and forget about it. It's been nearly a year, and I still can't stop reliving it every single day. I still think about that crack in the door, the blood on the floor, and the innocent guy who lost his life doing his job. The darkness in the world makes me sick, and I always wonder what he would have done to me if I'd stayed frozen for 1 second longer.